What if I told you that the biggest wealth opportunity of your lifetime is happening right now, and most people are completely blind to it? If you miss what I'm about to share in this video, you might look back 10 years from now and realize this was the moment everything could have changed for you. The world is going through a massive financial shift in 2026, one that only happens once every decade or longer. Most people are too distracted by daily expenses, inflation, and noise to see what's actually building right in front of them. But the people who recognize these rare windows and move fast are the ones who build lasting, generational wealth. The real talk begins. Here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Wealth is not built during normal times. Wealth is built during transition periods, when old systems are breaking down and new ones are rising up. And right now, in 2026, we are sitting in one of the most powerful transition periods in modern financial history. The question is not whether this opportunity exists. The question is, are you positioned to take advantage of it? There are three major forces driving this shift, and once you understand them, you'll never look at money the same way again. Let's break down the first one right now. Force number one, the great interest rate reset. Here's something that most everyday people don't realize. Interest rates are not just numbers that banks throw around. They are literally the heartbeat of the entire global economy. When rates go up, money becomes expensive. When rates come down, money becomes cheap. And cheap money means one thing: opportunity. For the past few years, central banks around the world raised interest rates aggressively to fight inflation. That made borrowing expensive, crushed real estate markets, slowed down businesses, and made people feel like wealth building was impossible. But here's what's changing in 2026. Central banks are now beginning to cut rates. And historically, every single time this rate-cutting cycle has begun, a massive wealth creation window has opened up, usually lasting 3 to 5 years. The people who understood this in the early 2000s built fortunes in real estate. The people who understood this after 2008 built fortunes in stocks. And the people who understand this right now in 2026, they are going to build the next generation of wealth. But here's the part that most financial channels won't tell you. It's not just about knowing that rates are falling. It's about knowing exactly where to put your money when rates fall. Because not every asset class benefits equally. Some explode in value, some stay flat, and some actually lose value even in a rate-cutting environment. So the real game, the game that separates the wealthy from the waiting, is knowing which assets are about to go on the biggest run of the next decade. And that's exactly what we're going to break down in this video, one by one. But before we get there, there's a second massive force that's working alongside the rate reset. And this one is even bigger. Let me give you a number that will completely change how you see the world right now. $90 trillion. That is the amount of wealth that is currently being transferred from the baby boomer generation to millennials and Gen Z over the next 20 years. $90 trillion. Let that sink in for a second. This is not a prediction. This is not a theory. This is already happening, right now, in 2026. Baby boomers, the generation that built massive wealth through real estate, stocks, and businesses over the last 40 to 50 years, are now aging. They are retiring. They are passing down their assets. And the largest intergenerational wealth transfer in the entire history of humanity is actively underway. Now here's where it gets really interesting. And this is the part that most people completely miss. When $90 trillion moves from one generation to another, it doesn't just sit still. It moves. It shifts into new asset classes. It flows into new industries. It chases new technologies. And the assets and sectors that receive the biggest chunk of this $90 trillion are going to see explosive, decade-long growth. Think about what happened when boomers were in their prime earning years. Real estate boomed because they all wanted homes. Stock markets soared because they all invested in retirement accounts. Shopping malls exploded because they were the biggest consumer generation alive. Now imagine the same effect, but this time driven by millennials and Gen Z, who have completely different priorities, completely different spending habits, and completely different investment preferences. They don't want malls, they want e-commerce. They don't want traditional banks, they want fintech. They don't want physical offices, they want remote everything. And the companies, assets, and sectors that serve these preferences are about to receive a tsunami of new capital. The investors who position themselves in front of this wave, before the mainstream catches on, are going to see returns that will seem almost unbelievable to the people who waited. But here's the thing. This wealth transfer alone, as powerful as it is only the second force. There is a third force that is currently supercharging both of these trends simultaneously. And when all three forces combine, that is when you get a once-in-a-generation wealth opportunity. Force number 3, the AI and technology wealth explosion. Let me be completely straight with you. Artificial intelligence is not just a trend. It is not a buzzword. It is not something that only affects tech companies in Silicon Valley. AI is the single most disruptive economic force that humanity has seen since the invention of the internet, and arguably, it is even bigger than that. Here is what makes 2026 so special. We are sitting right at the beginning of the mass adoption phase of AI. The early experimentation is over. The proof of concept is done. Now comes the part where AI gets embedded into every single industry on the planet. Healthcare, finance, real estate, education, manufacturing, retail, everything. And historically, the mass adoption phase of any transformational technology is where the biggest wealth is created. The people who invested in internet companies during mass adoption in the late 1990s and early 2000s, even through the crashes, ended up with life-changing returns. The people who understood smartphones during mass adoption built fortunes. And the people who understand AI during this mass adoption phase are going to look like geniuses 10 years from now. But here is the most important thing to understand. You do not need to be a tech expert to profit from this. You do not need to write code. You do not need to work in Silicon Valley. You just need to know where the money is flowing and position yourself there before everyone else figures it out. So now you understand the three forces: the interest rate reset, the $90 trillion wealth transfer, and the AI explosion. Each one alone is powerful, but all three happening at the same time, that is what creates a once-in-a-decade opportunity. Now let's talk about exactly how to take advantage of it, how to actually position yourself, the game plan. Okay, so now you understand the three forces that are creating this massive wealth window in 2026. But understanding is only half the battle. The real question is, what do you actually do with this information? Because knowledge without action is just entertainment. And I don't want you to just be entertained. I want you to be wealthy. So let's talk strategy. The very first thing you need to understand is that positioning yourself for a wealth opportunity like this is not about throwing all your money into one thing and hoping for the best. That is gambling. What we are talking about is strategic positioning, spreading yourself across the right assets, in the right order, at the right time. Think of it like planting seeds. You don't plant one seed and pray. You plant multiple seeds across fertile ground, and then you let time and compounding do the heavy lifting for you. Now here is the framework that smart investors are using right now in 2026 to take advantage of all three forces we just talked about. It has 3 layers, and each layer serves a specific purpose in your overall wealth building plan. The first layer is your foundation layer. This is the boring but absolutely essential part that most people skip because it doesn't feel exciting. But without this layer, everything else falls apart. The second layer is your growth layer. This is where the real acceleration happens, and this is where most of the wealth from these 3 forces is going to be captured. And the third layer is your high-risk, high-reward layer. This is optional, but for those who understand it, this is where life-changing returns can come from. Let's break down each layer one by one, starting right now. Let me be honest with you right now, this part of the video is not going to be exciting. It is not going to make you jump out of your seat. But I promise you, skipping this layer is the #1 reason why most people never actually build wealth, even when massive opportunities are sitting right in front of them. The foundation layer is simple. It is about making sure your financial house is in order before you start chasing opportunities. Because here is the brutal truth. If your foundation is broken, it doesn't matter how good the opportunity is. A leaking bucket cannot hold water, no matter how much you pour into it. So what does the foundation layer actually look like? 3 things. First, eliminate high-interest debt. Credit card debt, personal loans, any debt that is costing you more than 10% interest per year needs to go. Because no investment in the world consistently returns more than high-interest debt costs you. Paying off a 20% interest credit card is literally a guaranteed 20% return, and you will not find that anywhere else. Second, build your emergency fund. Before you invest a single dollar into any opportunity, You need 3 to 6 months of living expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account. Why? Because without an emergency fund, one unexpected expense forces you to sell your investments at the worst possible time. And selling at the wrong time is how people lose money in markets that are actually going up. Third, fix your monthly cash flow. You need to know exactly how much money is coming in, exactly how much is going out, and you need to make sure the difference, your surplus, is growing every single month. Because that surplus is your ammunition. That is the money you are going to deploy into the growth layer. And without ammunition, you cannot fight the battle. Get these 3 things right, and you are ready for the most exciting part of this entire strategy. This is the part you have been waiting for, and I promise it is worth it. The growth layer is where the 3 forces we talked about earlier, the rate reset, the wealth transfer, and the AI explosion, all come together into one powerful, actionable strategy. And this is where people who are paying attention in 2026 are going to separate themselves from everyone else financially. So let's get into it. The growth layer has 3 specific asset classes that are positioned to benefit the most from all 3 forces simultaneously. The first asset class is index funds and ETFs, specifically ones that are weighted towards technology and AI-driven sectors. Now, before you say, I already know about index funds, hear me out. Because most people invest in generic index funds and then wonder why their returns are average. The key in 2026 is not just investing in any index. It is about investing in the right indexes that are directly in the path of the AI explosion and the incoming wave of millennial and Gen Z capital. The second asset class is real estate, but not in the traditional way most people think about it. With interest rates coming down, real estate is about to enter a new growth cycle. But the smart play here is not just buying any property anywhere. The smart play is targeting specific markets and specific property types that are aligned with where the $90 trillion wealth transfer is flowing. We are talking about markets where millennials are moving, where remote work is driving demand, and where supply is still limited. That combination is a recipe for serious appreciation over the next 5 to 10 years. The third asset class is something that most traditional financial channels are still afraid to talk about seriously, and we are going to cover that in detail in the next layer. But first, let me tell you exactly how to allocate across these first 2 asset classes in a way that balances growth with protection. Okay, so now you know the 2 core asset classes in the growth layer. Index funds focused on AI and technology sectors, and real estate in high-demand millennial-driven markets. But knowing what to invest in is only half the answer. The other half, the part that actually determines whether you succeed or fail, is knowing how much to put where. Because allocation is everything. The wrong allocation can turn a great opportunity into a mediocre result. The right allocation can turn even a modest amount of money into something truly life-changing over a 10-year period. So here is the allocation framework that makes sense for most people in 2026, based on where we are in the economic cycle right now. If you are in your 20s or early 30s, you have time on your side, and that is your biggest asset. In this case, you want to be aggressive. Put 70% of your investable money into AI-focused index funds and ETFs. Put 20% into real estate, either directly if you can afford it, or through REITs if you are starting smaller. And keep 10% in cash or stable assets as dry powder for opportunities that come up unexpectedly. If you are in your mid-30s to late 40s, you are in your prime wealth-building years, and this is actually the sweet spot. Put 55% into index funds and ETFs. Put 30% into real estate, and keep 15% in cash and stable assets. This balance gives you strong growth exposure while also protecting what you have already built. If you are in your 50s or beyond, your focus shifts slightly, but you still want real growth. Put 40% into index funds with a mix of growth and dividend-focused ETFs. Put 35% into real estate for income and appreciation. And keep 25% in stable, income-generating assets. Now here is the one rule that applies to every single age group without exception. Never stop contributing. Consistency beats timing every single time. The people who invest a fixed amount every single month, regardless of what the market is doing, are the ones who end up wealthy. Not because they are smarter, but because they never stop. And now, it is finally time to talk about the third asset class, the one that most financial channels avoid. the high-risk, high-reward layer that has the potential to completely change your financial trajectory. Let me start this section with a very clear warning. Everything I am about to share with you is for people who already have their foundation solid and their growth layer actively working. If you have skipped layers 1 and 2 and jumped straight here, please go back. Because this layer without the first two is not investing. It is gambling. And gambling with your financial future is something I will never encourage. But for those of you who are ready, this layer has the potential to deliver returns that your index funds and real estate simply cannot match in the same time frame. We are talking about individual AI company stocks, early-stage fintech, and yes, digital assets. Now let me be very specific here because this category gets misunderstood constantly. I am not telling you to go buy random cryptocurrencies because someone on social media told you it was going to the moon. That is not a strategy, that is noise. What I am talking about is understanding which specific digital assets and early-stage technology companies are directly tied to the three forces we discussed: the rate reset, the wealth transfer, and the AI explosion. Because when all three forces are pushing capital in the same direction, even smaller and riskier assets in that path can see extraordinary growth. Think about it this way. When a river floods, everything in the floodplain gets water. The big established trees get water. But the smaller plants that were struggling before, they suddenly explode with growth because now they have access to resources they never had before. That is exactly what happens to high-risk assets during a major wealth cycle shift. The key is being selective and disciplined. You are not putting 50% of your money here. You are not putting 30%. The maximum anyone should allocate to this layer is 10% of their total investable assets. And even that is only for people with a high risk tolerance and a long time horizon. Within that 10%, diversify across at least 5 to 7 different positions. Never put your entire high-risk allocation into one single bet. Because in this layer, you expect some positions to fail completely. What you are betting on is that one or two of your positions deliver returns so large that they more than make up for everything else. That is how this layer works. That is how it has always worked. And in 2026, with all three forces aligned, the probability of finding those explosive winners is higher than it has been in a very long time. So let's bring everything together. In 2026, we have three massive forces aligning at the exact same time. Interest rates coming down, $90 trillion changing hands, and AI reshaping every single industry on the planet. This combination does not happen often. In fact, it may not happen again in your lifetime. And the people who recognize this moment, who build their foundation, stack their growth layer, and take calculated risks in the right places, are the ones who will look back 10 years from now completely financially transformed. But here is the most important thing I want to leave you with. The biggest risk is not losing money. The biggest risk is doing nothing. Inflation is rising. The cost of living is not going down. And standing still financially in 2026 means falling behind. The window is open right now. Not forever, right now. So take what you learned today and take one step. Just one. Open that investment account. Pay off that credit card. Research that first ETF. Because wealth is never built in one giant leap. It is built one intentional decision at a time. If this video gave you value, share it with someone who needs to hear this. And if you are serious about building real wealth in 2026, subscribe because we are just getting started.